It's actually dramatically changed our workflow. We test out our simplest to our wildest ideas with vibe coding, with initial prompts, and then we actually try to bring them to life. When you feel that out, I don't need to get into a meeting with engineering and be like, hey, this is how it should work, and blah, and I'm hand waving, and they're like, this guy's insane for coming up with this idea. Why? Instead, I send them this prototype, and they're like, wow, this feels so much better.
Remember Ammaar Reshi? I interviewed him when he was the head of design at 11 Labs because he has all these incredible AI experiments. Well, now he's leading product and design at Google DeepMind. So this episode is a behind the scenes into what he's up to today, including how he prototyped the all new Google AI Studio. So if you're interested in vibe coding and how it impacts the design process, then you're going to love this one.
Recently we launched Nano Banana, which was our powerful image editing model that came a couple of weeks ago. And we've just seen an insane amount of reception and people building so many cool things with it. And part of it was you get a new model to play with and you need to find out and discover the extent of what's possible with it. One of the ideas I had was like, well, what if this model could transform you through the decades? And, I think it's a really fun one because it's personal. It's something you can share with your friends. And also it's just something I was curious about. So Rin, I'm kind of curious to see what you look like through these decades.
No. So I already love the little details, you were going a little bit beyond testing the models. You got the 3D tilt with the light shimmer and everything.
You gotta, it's the designer in me, you gotta add.
Yeah. You're not gonna sneak past me. That's good.
Yeah. So I've got this wonderful photo of you from Twitter, and I want to see what you look
nervous.
like through the decades. Hey, I'm confident. And so yeah, part of what's fun about this is it's not just the model, but like there's so many little experience things that also make it feel magical. The way the Polaroids like fade in, yeah, you looking good. Yeah, looking great in those 50s.
Oh, you can drag them around too. Oh, this is fun. Oh God, the 70s need to go away. Well, I'd rock that top middle jacket though, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. You got the 80s look down. And look, okay, maybe you don't like the 70s one. Another interaction I just vibe coded was just let me shake it. And
no way. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And it's just a prompt away. I was basically to the assistant on the left. I was like, hey, like I want to add shake to reload. How do we feel about this one? Like,
I like that one more. That has straight sex appeal. I still can't get over the shake to reload. That's something that I wouldn't even have thought of. I have no concept of what that underlying code could be, but it's such a fun thing to just like, what if I could shake to reload it and just shoot your shot and see if it works?
Yeah, what is interesting is the first time it actually was just like too sensitive to the way I was dragging. Like this would have done it. I had to ask the model. I was like, no, it's only when I shake really aggressively, and it like improved the sensitivity. So it's like stuff that, again, I would not have known how to code, but I know what it should feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Aggressively isn't even a word in the world of CSS and front-end frameworks, but it makes sense to you.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And the model knows how to translate that into code, which is, hey, good enough for us. And the other cool thing about this is I find that when you're vibe coding like this, you can just see all the variations of your ideas. So this one showing us things from the past, but what if we were like, make this app futuristic instead, right? And again, just as simple as a single prompt. We're going to send that off, and then Gemini's going to go and build with it here on the left. So while it does that, let's switch to another app that I wanted to show you.
Okay.
And this one was another one I was playing with Nano Banana on, which, how many times have you been online shopping and you're wondering, like, will that thing look good on me? Why aren't you also just the model on the page? And so, again, Red, I'm going to put you through this. Let's make you wear some Gemini swag and see how that looks.
Okay.
But again, fun interactions, because I was like, I wanted people to feel the magic immediately while things were generating. And so you can immediately kind of see yourself in side by side.
Yeah, it's cool. How often, for something like that slider, are you really just describing it? Or how often are you attaching other visual references? Like, what's your prompting strategy for something like a pattern like that?
Yeah, so there's this website essentially where you can get a bunch of really helpful React components, and it's just as easy as then like copying the code and giving that to the assistant.
Oh, cool.
Even if different frameworks. So I found this one on GitHub actually, and you can see the little sparkles that this has, and I wanted those for the comparison stuff. And so again, it's just as easy as like looking at the code here. I grab it manually. I look at the sparkles file. I basically just like copy all of this, the TypeScript, and then I'll just paste that in, like add sparkles, like blah. And then, I'll just paste in the code, hit enter, and it'll do its job.
Great resource.
If there's specific things you want, you can do that. I even go to Figma's code thing when I want, styles to be matched properly.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just such a lifesaver.
It's like a high level belief I have about building and designing in the future is there's such a high ROI to just investing in your own inspiration databases and things you like and resources. Like I've started taking that stuff really, really seriously because now it's so easy to feed it into the models.
And the models essentially are just mapping one person's implementation into their own implementation, right? Yep. So you don't have to worry too much. So here you are wearing one of our swag shirt designs, build, ship, repeat, Gemini. We can even make you pose in different ways, and the model can then take a bunch of information. So it's taking the t-shirt, it's taking you as the model, it's taking the pose, and you're essentially crafting all the angles it could be, modeling this in.
It makes me feel a little bit physically uncomfortable, but I respect it.
I think you're looking good for what it's worth. What's interesting here is this is actually very advanced. Like what we're doing here is we're taking the t-shirt information. We're then taking the model and we're posing against it. And the way I had to describe that was I basically was just like, hey, don't forget the previous generation and make sure you then combine it with the new clothing item that I added. I just described it the way I wanted it, and it made it happen.
I'm sure there's somebody that's looking at this and like, this is cute. This is fun. I can see how it was probably very enjoyable to bring to life, but it's not super clear how it translates into their day-to-day workflow. And so I'm curious, how much are you using these processes and tools in your regular, weekly deliverables as someone who's leading design and product?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's actually dramatically changed our workflow. We test out our simplest to our wildest ideas with vibe coding, with initial prompts, and then we actually try to bring them to life. So actually, what I might show you first is I'll show you some Figma files, and then I'll show you some ideas that we're trying there. And they're just hard to even prototype in Figma. And so how do you actually feel that out in code? And then I'll walk you through the smallest ideas to some of our craziest.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want.
So this one's interesting because I was thinking about a very common thing that people have when they're working in AI Studio, which is you end up having long conversations with the model, and then you can sometimes lose your place. Like, oh, I wanted to know what message I'd sent earlier, and that specific part maybe had some code that you actually cared about. How do you jump back, right? And obviously the natural interaction to do that, it's like you're either doing Command F and trying to find it, or you're scrolling all the way up and down. So one of the wild ideas that kind of just struck me at one point was like, well, what if we actually just like redesign the scroll bar a little bit and had this like timeline view on it, maybe that showed you important points on it? What would that feel like? And it's one of those things where, I had a Figma prototype where I was playing with it, but it's not.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, it's hard to stitch that up. It's hard to not make it just feel like a static PowerPoint where you're just like flipping between two states. So we ended up here where I'd basically pasted in the mock into AI Studio, and I was like, hey, can you turn the scroll bar into a thing? And I also wanted to feel it across different sizes of conversations. So you have a long conversation, you have a full conversation. And again, in mocks, we would have had to like duplicate this and fill out the conversation and try to see what it would look like at scale. This was me just asking it to just like write stuff. One thing I personally hate is scroll jacking. So it doesn't actually ever take over your scroll bar or change it in the way you're used to. You can still use it as you would. You can still kind of like grab it and like move it up and down, like that all works fine. But then you now have these points, right? So as I'm scrolling, I can see the different points.
That's clever.
Like, yeah, maybe I want to jump here. And so I can go ahead and do that. But then look at this one. This is so many points. So I was like, could you add keyboard shortcuts and let me see how that feels? And it did. And so now I'm actually pressing the up and down arrows on my keyboard right now.
Wow. And that was that was one prompt probably, right?
That was one prompt. There was one prompt.
It's amazing.
So natural. The little scale up that it added. And then I was like, cool, now I want enter to like jump to a point. So maybe I can go all the way up here and hit enter. And you have the smooth scroll all the way back to that point and it fades away. When you feel that out, I don't need to get into a meeting with engineering and be like, hey, this is how it should work and blah. And I'm hand waving and they're like, this guy's insane for coming up with this idea. Why are we? Instead, I send them this prototype and they're like, wow, this feels so much better.
Yeah. And even if it felt bad, like, I don't know, you feel bad by stealing from engineering resources for something that might be a terrible idea, And so you're able to suss that out without having to feel like you're wasting other people's time. And this ended up being really cool.
Yeah, you actually make a great point, which is some of these things, I know, especially for designers, like adding flair or adding these quality of life things can feel hard to balance with the priorities of all the other things that you're doing that might feel higher priority. But when you do something like this that addresses the user pain point, might not essentially be that obvious, but you now have a prototype that everybody gets bought into. That's just another way to get buy-in, right?
Yeah.
And it's another way to make the space and allocate for that. And, once we put this out there, we had a bunch of users saying, I didn't know you could redesign a scroll bar. And
I'd never seen anything like this.
It's been super fun to see, like, yeah, you can reconsider any design detail. Maybe I was out of inspiration and it decided, it'll add a little scale up and add this little flair. We brought that to the final implementation. So
really, it made it all the way in?
It made it all the way in.
It's cool. It's another one of those little things that happens all the time for me too, where I wouldn't have thought of something and it just comes out of the box and I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. Just keep going.
100%. Let me show you a chat. Cool. Yeah. So I was playing around with this game. You can see tons of code being pasted, very hard to find like a spot. And this is now in production. So yeah, if you do go to production, you
look
can
at
see
that
there. It has the same like scroll feel to it. You have the keyboard shortcuts where you can jump around and scales up and does the little highlight. Pass it over to engineering, they knew exactly how to feel it out. There were even parts of code that they could take, right? Speed up the entire process for everybody, which was really awesome to see.
This use case that you're describing is kind of the slam dunk in my mind for vibe coding prototypes, which is I have an idea for an interaction that would essentially be impossible to bring to life in a traditional Figma prototype. And I can make it happen in code. Maybe I don't even really care about the surrounding UI being perfect. Like it's okay for it to be 70 to 80% fidelity. I don't want to waste time sweating the details on like the typography when literally all I care about is that scroll bar. So that makes sense to me. Are there other use cases? Like how do you think at a slightly higher level, more strategically about when to use these tools? Like when does it actually help you in your design process versus are there other times where it's like, yeah, maybe it is better to just kind of riff in mockup land for a little bit?
I think mockup land I found to be helpful whenever you're kind of doing a higher level alignment on a broad change in direction. So for instance, when we were redesigning AI Studio as a whole, that has a lot of questions that you don't even need to get to vibe coding to feel out. Like, do we like the new theme and color? Do we like the new typography and styles, right? Like, do we like the way we rearranged the content on the screen? All of that is stuff that you can still have conversations with, just rely on like the Figma craft to like put together. The precision somewhat matters there, right? Because you need to get the typography and those little details right. Whereas vibe coding, like you said, I think you can sacrifice precision for some of the just like idea being felt out. But that's where I found it to be very helpful. Then I think if you're getting to the stage of, well, what does this actually feel like to use? Then I think you should start getting to vibe coding because you really start to test your interactions. You might find those traditional edge cases that would have taken an engineer trying to implement your thing to find first. You can kind of get ahead of all of that, which I found to be very, very useful. And I can actually show you like, okay, how did we go from old AI Studio to this new direction? And then we did something crazy, which we vibe coded the entire experience, whole app, not just a scroll bar, but the entire thing end to end.
Oh yeah, let's definitely take a look at that because I think that's one of the more interesting use cases is like, when do we do AI vibe coding for the full thing where I'm like navigating between pages and sections and not just focus on something that's a little bit more interaction heavy.
This was what AI Studio used to look like. And there were a number of things that were really kind of bothering our users up front, which is one, like it really wasn't designed for density. Like when you're using a developer product, you're going to have tons of code you're working with. You need the real estate to actually work with this stuff. You have a top bar here that's taking up a bunch of room. There's a side panel that's kind of squishing everything. And then even the navigation is somewhat confusing because there's so many different ways you can reach these models. And then when you were actually browsing and looking for models, which these come out all the time. How do you actually make it really easy to find the latest ones and their capabilities. And then also from a visual standpoint, we just wanted to clean it up and do somewhat of a refresh on all of this. So that's when we started exploring like this direction, which really gave you all the vertical real estate you needed to explore AI Studio. This was initially some of the old navigation, and you'll see how that evolves in a second. And then, with density and all of that, like there was so much more room for very long conversations. Code blocks, we rethought, can you expand and collapse them? And do you really need this like chat layout versus just this very straightforward layout? And then I was looking at what kind of complexity could we add for developers, because they care about token count. They care about how much a conversation might cost. You can still expose some of this complexity, but still make it feel digestible and minimal, right? And so this is, to your point earlier, like this is the Figma stage of how do we feel about this? Like, do people like where it's going, right? People like that we're leading into this complexity and trying some new things. And people generally were like, yeah, that seems good. But it was still hard to drum up the excitement, because for a lot of people, they're like, well, why do we do another redesign? Should we actually spend the time investing in this? Yeah, it seems good. Maybe we'll just incrementally get there. And so this is where a vibe coded prototype really helped, because it started to make people feel the new world of AI Studio. And once they felt it, they were like, I don't want to use anything else.
Yeah. You get that comparison all of a sudden. It's hard to compare the old world with mocks. You don't really feel the difference.
The other thing is like designers just happen to be closer to the details. We'll spot more of these things, like the little details in the navigation, the way you immediately saw the tilt on the Polaroid, right? Earlier. And some people don't actually grok that until they like feel it and they see that and they click around. And that's the kind of thing that is a little bit of a challenge. Then I actually vibe coded the entire thing. Now you see the way it like fades and loads, right? For the first time, it's you with models. So it leans into models being at the forefront. It rethought the way you browse for models. And now you can kind of see the different top level categories, image generation, audio generation, right? And all of that fun stuff. And then one of the things you'll also notice is the nav over here, like really took a change and made it so simple. It was like one playground was an idea I was playing with. So today you had to go through a media tab to play with media models, a chat one to do chat ones. And I was like, why can't there just be one playground? And so I'll show you how we can feel that out. But then for a user, it's so clear: playground, build, documentation, dashboard. And that's really it. And it kind of also just spells out all of the core capabilities of a product. And so let's see how it feels like with a model. So again, little interactions that I was able to try. It's like you click this thing, you got a little toast, it selects the thing for you. If I tab on a suggestion, I get it like selected automatically. Oh, cool. These are all the little details, we were able to like play with. But let me do like something with code, right? A Python calculator app. It's using my own API key. So it feels like you're actually using AI Studio. And then we were able to like try these micro interactions. Like what should it look like when it's generating a response, right? You can see that you get a feel for what those code blocks will look like and how much density actually fits on the page. You can collapse and expand them so you can save room in the conversation. One of the other ideas we had was like, well, what if I could just hover over this and it gives me a cost thing based on the documentation? How did I vibe code that part? I just told it, here's the cost table from the documentation. Can you make a calculation for this based on the conversation? It did that. So like all of this was vibe coded. And then what if I wanted to change models to an image generation one, right? So I don't have to leave. I don't have to go anywhere else. I can just say, a toy car. And, it's starting to generate that. And then the other cool thing here is that it starts to, there you go.
You literally built AI Studio.
Yeah, we basically rebuilt AI Studio.
Unbelievable.
And you know how much time this took? This basically took one flight back from San Francisco to New York, and then maybe 2 more days on the weekend, and that was it. We had something to show people. We had something that they could feel out and see this like new design experience and get excited about, right? The team saw this and they were like, oh, we're so ready to like do this.
I think it was Soleo said it. He talked about the aura of inevitability. And if you can create that around your ideas, then they just happen, Yeah. When you're literally using the product, that is the pinnacle of inevitability, It's like, this thing's happening. It's already here. You want it or not,
Yeah. Exactly. It's like now you know what the next version will look and feel like. And if it feels net better to you, like how, it's like, yeah, of course we're going to do it. As a designer, I think the other thing here that's nice is like it kind of helps you figure out. I always go back to like the systems thinking of design too, right? So how do you make a one playground work? And it's like, because we changed the chat layout, you can actually just surface the model name with every response. And suddenly you realize there's a pattern now for how the models will respond in different contexts and different selections. And you build out a system around your designs too, in a way, or test them to see if they actually work at all.
Real quick message, and then we can jump back into it. By now, you probably know how much I love granola, so I'm going to toss it to one of my favorite designers, James McDonald, to share his experience. He says granola is one of the best AI tools out there, and the fact that it takes notes during calls and meetings and stores them for later is genuinely life-changing, and I couldn't agree more. I simply cannot imagine life without granola at this point, so if you're a designer, you shouldn't be having a conversation about your work without running granola. And they're offering 3 months free for you and anyone on your team. All you have to do is go to dive.club/granola. I didn't see this coming, but I'm all in on using voice as the primary way that I interact with my computer, especially when prototyping with AI. And it's way faster than typing and perfect for brain dumping context, but I used to have to use a separate tool, except now voice mode is built directly into Lovable. So building your ideas is as simple as having a conversation. It's just another reason why Lovable is my first choice for AI prototyping, so head to dive.club/lovable to try it today. Okay, now on to the episode. Okay, so I have a few questions. Starting all the way at the beginning. Sounds like it started on that flight. What are those first few prompts? How much are you even trying to tackle? What context are you feeding the model in the beginning? Are you doing mockups? This is a lot to bring to life, and depending on your strategy that you take prompting, you're going to have a good time or a bad time. So how do you think about prototyping something of this size?
That's a really great question. And I think it goes back to you kind of have to wear a bit of a PM hat when you're doing this. And what I mean by that is like PMs will think about, how do I scope this? And what are the different parts of it that I want to like build out first? And you break up the design into many, many small parts. My initial prompt was first just kind of taking one of the start screens. And then what I did was I just went to like developer mode essentially and grabbed all the styles that I had, right? So I was like, okay, here's the CSS, here's that, here's the content. What you're doing is you're making an AI playground. That's the first bullet. It needs to look like this. Here's some styles. That's literally all you do first. So you'll get some sort of a dashboard going. And then I'm like, okay, on the left nav, you have these 3 sections. They need to look like this. Here's the style for a selected state, for a non-selected state. I give it that. Then I get a left nav that works. Cool. Okay. Now I want the right nav. And I basically like break that out. And then I say, okay, well, actually the right nav is nested. So when I click this thing, you need to show me a list of the models. Here's the list of the models from the documentation. And so I'm like going brick by brick, kind of setting up all the pieces of this app and riffing on just those bricks until I'm ready to move on to the next part. And then the icing on the cake for me was like, cool, once I've selected a model, you call the Gemini API with my API key and give me a response in chat. And then it finally did that last part. If you were to go, here's AI Studio, here's the mock, like I want you to do all of this, you're not going to get the, you're just not going to get it. And so really it's this like building blocks of think about your design in terms of these components that you've defined now and actually pass those over to the model. And build those out one by one and riff on those, perfect those, and then move on to the next thing. And that's how it starts to feel really polished.
Makes sense. Honestly, that's kind of how I've been approaching it too. So part of me feels pretty good about that answer. Like I'm not too far off. I keep coming back to this mental model of you just dump a block of clay and then chisel away at it, Yeah. And so that first prompt for you was really just the block of clay. You're not even really trying to get that specific. You just want to get in the ballpark of, and then you'll take it one panel at a time kind of thing.
Take it one panel at a time. At some point, I'm like, okay, make sure the typography includes inter and these styles. And then my color palette is these 4 colors. I don't even worry about like typography not being right or any of that until somewhat towards the end, because that to me is like the final polish. The major thing is like, are the interactions feeling right? I'm just kind of back and forth on those until I've gotten what I really wanted. First I added the code block. Then I was like, now let's make collapse work. And so you just kind of go one by one like that.
For the purposes of this prototype, where you're casting vision for kind of a bigger redesign investment, where do you think you got the fidelity level to? Like, were you sweating the details on typography and spacing? Were you kind of saying, 90% is enough? Like, what was your goal? And then how does that compare to maybe something that's a slightly smaller vibe coded project?
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think here, I just wanted the initial look and feel of some core screens. And so you can see I've got a main conversation screen going here. I wanted that scroll bar feel to see like what that could look like. I think I had the model browser here somewhere. You can see I've just like been kind of tweaking and trying small parts of it. Oh yeah, model browser here. I was playing with the side panel layout. So once I got those few pieces in, and then there was buy-in, then I came back and did an exhaustive end-to-end thing, because the thing I also wanted from this was to get the engineering details right. So for instance, we had, prior to this redesign, there were maybe 40 or 50 color tokens that people had to reference because there was a slight gradient here, there was like a light blue there, whatever. And this really simplified it. There was like a muted color, an active color, and then maybe some accents here and there. So we went from a color token list of like 40 to one that was, I think it's just like 8. So now what's amazing is, even from an engineering point of view, you essentially have a much smaller set and a much smaller room for error when you're implementing stuff. And so we then took each piece and basically refined it and created a little bit of a design system around it. And so this is the back to the Figma part, where you're like polishing the details and making sure it feels right and everything's good. But you wouldn't do this if you didn't have buy-in. This would be such a waste of time to like go and refine and tune and test. If people are like, yeah, we'll do this like 2 quarters from now. Not worth it, especially when so many other things are moving fast. So that's where I go back to like, you go vibe code, come back, got the buy-in, let's go refine the craft. And then it's actually a bit of back and forth on the implemented thing versus the Figma thing and tuning that, right? The traditional process that we're all used to. And then for the smaller things like the scroll bar, I actually never finished the designs for that. I just gave the vibe coded prototype away, and I was like, that's good enough, honestly. And then just like, so some things you can just get away with.
I've had similar experiences where when it's more about the interaction, I'm like, okay, my intent is represented here, and I feel good about that. And I'm not going to sweat that level of detail.
You don't need to either, because we had defined a system here and colors here and all of that. The scroll bar was just using all of those things.
Yeah.
The thing that mattered the most was the interaction. Right.
And it's hard to define that in Figma anyway. So you kind of just got to get as close as you can. Okay, so zooming out here, you've been doing these AI experiments for a very long time. Like, this is not your first rodeo. Even the nano banana stuff that you were sharing earlier, I mean, you got like 2 years of these under your belt. So when you kind of look at your approach to vibe coding, are there ways that you have evolved that approach, or maybe lessons that you've learned about prompting or getting the most out of the models, or anything that you want to share with people that you think could help them get a little bit momentum behind this part of their practice of design?
There are a few things that I think really matter. Like, one, if you're in the world of like, I'm translating my Figma mocks to vibe coded prototypes, really lean into developer mode. Treat those like constraints and the things that Figma gives you as something you can pass off to your vibe coding assistant. Treat it like you would with a developer, and you can get pretty close to the fidelity. Because I know a lot of designers who complain, oh, it just doesn't have the level of polish. It's like, well, actually, if that polish is in your Figma, you can get it there, because it's just follow your instructions. The second thing I think is really important is just try multiple approaches to the same problem. Like, I think I found it very helpful to sometimes even take a prompt that I have and then ask AI separately, what are 4 ways you would rewrite this? You'll find that sometimes it'll hit on the thing that you maybe thought you were saying well, and it came up with a better way to say those things, a better way to ask for a specific thing. Because sometimes you have to ask in a way that it understands in code, right? You're kind of like, you might want to say, when you're generating these images, generate them in simultaneous threads, like a programming thing, right? You're kind of saying like, make sure you're actually doing these things concurrently at the same time. But if you're not technical, you might not know how to even go about that. And so that's where use AI to like ask, like, how could I ask for generating all my Polaroids at the same time? Then it might give you a better prompt that you can like bring to it. The third thing I think that's really important is the thing we talked about, which is have a library of these components. Find components from GitHub, open source stuff. Those are always great references. My new test for myself is, can I just make these things with the mock in my head and not even like a Figma at all? And how close can I get to the polish? And so that modeling one, the fashion design one, was purely that. It was just like, I know I wanted to feel like a fashion magazine or like a page like ASOS or Zara or whatever, where it's like clean whites and, like typography. And it was just riffing on that, looking at Google Fonts and picking stuff out and passing that over. That's a great way to kind of not pigeonhole it. And you might even be inspired by the way the model comes up with things. So for instance, it came up with this like wardrobe side panel. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like maybe it should become a sheet as well. So it like slides up on mobile and like slides down. And so you can use it as your riffing buddy. Like, I think that's also really important. And then the final thing I always go back to is like, go in with the assumption that nothing is impossible. Truly just go in saying, I can build it. I promise you with that mindset, you are going to get so far. Like so many people tell me like, is that even possible to build? I'm like, did you prompt for it? Did you ask for it?
Yeah. The scroll bar is the perfect example. Like I wouldn't have spent any time mocking that up in Figma because I didn't have near enough certainty that I could even do something like that. Like that the web would even allow for it, But when you can just kind of dip your toes and be like, I wonder. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Turns out.
No, this is exactly it. It's like shed the constraints that you're used to. You can redesign a scroll bar.
Ammaar, this has been awesome. You just have a regular spot on this show because you're just doing super interesting things, and I really enjoy following along with your journey. So thank you for pulling back the curtain in a very real way today and showing a little bit about your process and how you think, the behind the scenes. Always fun.
It's always fun chatting with you, Rit, and always fun riffing with you and now modeling you in these apps. So